Hello and welcome to IMA's Inside Talk webinar series. The title of today's presentation is AI-Powered Business Intelligence, Shaping the Future of Accounting and Finance. We're very pleased to have Oracle NetSuite as our sponsor for today's session. My name's Sam Walker. I'm going to be your host for today's webinar. Before we get started, I'd like to remind you of a couple things to keep in mind as we go through today's session. First, please use the Q&A window on the left side of your screen to send questions to the presenters or to request technical assistance. Please do keep in mind that refreshing your browser will often correct most connection issues that you might experience. Secondly, in order to earn CPE credit today, you must participate completely in the live webinar by logging in on time, as well as responding to all of the poll questions. At this time, I'd like to introduce Stephen Wolff, who will be our featured presenter for today's program. Stephen serves as managing partner at Myers-Holum, Inc., and he serves as the lead of their NetSuite solution architecture team. With expertise in products industries, Stephen excels in delivering high-quality solutions to meet the needs of SMB and enterprise class customers. To learn more about Stephen, please look in the speaker bio section of your console. Stephen, it's great to have you with us today. We're looking forward to a very informative and great presentation. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Sam. Really appreciate it. I'm really excited to be here today to speak about this topic. Before we start, I'll give a quick overview of my firm, Myers-Holum, and what we do. So Myers-Holum is an award-winning implementation partner of NetSuite, Boomi, Stripe, Google Cloud Platform, and several other business applications. We help enterprise implement ERP, implement FP&A tools, fintech tools such as Stripe and payments. And we primarily work in the middle market. So Myers-Holum is focused on accounting and finance tool and ERP implementation, really from SMB to the enterprise. But I'd say our big focus is middle market firms, typically firms between a total annual revenue of about, let's say 200 million to 2 to 3 billion in annual revenues. We're primarily focused in North America, but we support global implementations and rollouts for global companies as well. And Myers-Holum has about 400 consultants in our practice, focused almost entirely on NetSuite implementation, which is the kind of the core ERP partner that we focus on. So that's just a quick background on myself and our firm today, and really excited to talk about our topic of how AI and machine learning is applied to business intelligence, and especially in use cases within the realm of accounting and finance. So a quick agenda overview for today. We'll start high level on an understanding of what is AI, what is machine learning, and then I'm going to dive into some practical current state use cases for accounting and finance teams, how we see our clients either leveraging machine learning or planning on leveraging machine learning, and a little bit more in the future state of how in the near term and then maybe a little bit farther into the future, we'll see our clients start to incorporate generative AI as well. And then I'll talk about how in your roles as accounting and finance professionals, you can plan to incorporate these technologies in the future, what the requisites are, what the prerequisites are for implementing machine learning and artificial intelligence, and what you can do today to ensure that you're best prepared to take advantage of these relatively new technologies. And then we'll wrap it up in a conclusion with some Q&A and any key takeaways. So before we start getting into the meat of the presentation, wanted to kick off today with a poll question to start. So just getting some answers from the room. Has your organization evaluated or implemented machine learning or any generative AI tools today. So you've neither evaluated or implemented any machine learning or generative AI. You're currently evaluating, but not yet implementing. And you've already implemented machine learning and or any generative AI tools today.
Stephen, let me ask a quick question, if I may, while we're waiting for the audience to kind of populate. The theme today obviously is largely in the context of AI, but you've used a couple of different terms thus far, and there's been kind of an evolution, if you will, in the industry. Machine learning, automation tools, either specific functionality, and then today, obviously, much of the positioning is in the context of AI. Can you talk just briefly about kind of what that chronological evolution has looked like, and then are we realistically kind of lumping everything into a broad concept of AI today? Would you just take a moment and kind of talk about that?
Absolutely. When organizations use the word broadly AI or artificial intelligence in the enterprise and in business contexts, organizations are really talking about both machine learning and this relatively newer technology, which is generative AI. Machine learning isn't new. Machine learning has really been around for decades. But in enterprise and corporate contexts and business contexts, it's been just largely ignored or not implemented for really the full length that it's been around or known by data scientists or researchers. And I think the reason that machine learning is maybe in the last 5 or 10 years really starting to gain a lot more focus from enterprise is because historically, there were computational requirements, limitations of computing power available. And so this new cloud era that we're all in has really brought in a resurgence of a new focus on machine learning. And I think also a lot of the new activity around generative AI is resulting in our customers. We're seeing our customers now with more cheaply available cloud tools. And now with a lot of focus on generative AI, they're going back and starting the journey really with integrating machine learning into their forecasting cycle or their day-to-day accounting processes.
Thanks, Stephen. Appreciate very much the insight. So it looks like we've got a population here. So I'm going to turn it back to you and let you talk about how the audience responded.
All right, great. So I'd say this distribution of responses pretty much matches my expectation. We've got a little under 20% that's already implemented some machine learning or generative AI tool. A little over a third of you responded that you're currently evaluating but not yet implemented. And just a little under half responded that you're neither evaluating any ML tools or AI tools, and nothing's been implemented so far. Not much more commentary here other than it seems to be representative of our experience as a consulting firm as well. So we'll move on to the next slide now. And before we start talking about use cases, I just want to maybe further give an overview on the differentiation of machine learning, which is, again, like I mentioned, been around for quite some time already versus this relatively newer technology called generative AI. And before I break down the differences between the two, let's talk about just overall artificial intelligence and machine learning. So when an organization says that they want to embark on implementing AI-driven analytics, it might mean that we're actually combining the two. So what AI analytics means to us and our projects is that we're combining artificial intelligence and our standard analytical packages or BI tools or capabilities to generate potentially new insights, generate insights faster, automate the process of model creation, of simulation, of narration of analytical outputs or reports or forecasts. And ultimately, we do this so that we can drive better outcomes, drive more accurate forecasting, uncover new scenarios, new key drivers and KPIs, answer questions that we might not have been able to answer before. And some key points that are very important when talking about AI and machine learning. First of all, analytical tools are required to do this. So there are, whether it's a data warehouse or an analytics platform, or it's a tool that's developed homegrown by your internal data scientists or data engineering teams, there are tools that are required to implement these technologies. I think even more importantly is that an enterprise needs to ensure that their data is somewhat unified, that it's clean, that the data, accounting events and non-accounting events and transactions and information that we're generating as an enterprise is stored and modeled in a unified way, and that it's actually the data that we're looking for. It's clean and representative of our reality. We also really want to ensure when we're that data that is not unified and clean, it's comprehensive. So we need a comprehensive view of all of our accounting events and business drivers, so that we're not implementing ML models that are not certified to provide relevant outcomes. And most importantly, I think folks in business and enterprise, especially business users, they see a lot of the value of leveraging machine learning or generative AI as increasing efficiency. And those efficiencies come on the back end of an AI or an ML-based forecasting project, as an example. But there is absolutely time and effort required upfront to implement these technologies. So while we can decrease the cycle time of a forecast cycle, of an FP&A workflow, we're wanting to move now to what we call a zero-day close from an accounting standpoint. Those efficiencies will be created on the back end of a project, but these are projects that we're engaging with and our clients to implement these tools. They're not just plug and play. So the magic really comes on the back end after a project is completed. And getting a little bit more in detail into just the difference between machine learning and now generative AI, which if you're seeing, ChatGPT and OpenAI in the news and DALL-E 2 as an example, these are generative AI technologies. But again, machine learning has been around already for quite some time. So machine learning is very simply put for this slide, a method of data analysis that automates analytical model building. Some of the use cases of machine learning historically have been fraud detection, risk management. Obviously, forecasting is a very popular use case for machine learning. And what generative AI can do is, on top of leveraging machine learning models in these use cases, can generate entirely new content that's primarily for businesses and finance and accounting teams in text format. But generative AI can create report generation, can identify matching criteria in an accounting workflow for reconciliation. It can generate memos or flux analysis reporting, both in written text and numerical formats. It can also generate a large number of scenarios to model off of. And it can generate, we can create simulations through this scenario generation. So generative AI is using some of the same technologies, machine learning, but now in a generative context where we're creating new content, we're creating new information that we can use in our workflow and also to then reforecast off of. Machine learning is automating analytical model building in a way that is, again, more automated than what we would do with just, let's say, a regular field sales forecast as an example. So those are the kind of just the key breakdown differences between machine learning and now this newer generative AI. So I'd like to talk next just about some core use cases, both for machine learning, and then we'll go into another quick poll question, and then I'll bring on some use cases for generative AI that we're seeing. So I'll talk a little bit about also in showing you these use cases, different model types and the different predictive values and outputs that they can generate. And we'll give a little bit of an overview of what machine learning model types might be best suited to answer a specific question or generate an output. So when you think about how can I leverage machine learning as a business user, the first thing to think about how you want to kind of the framework that you want to apply to machine learning is that it's going to be answering questions for us. Okay. And within machine learning, I'll talk about supervised versus unsupervised, but we have kind of these four main model types that are commonly implemented in enterprise. There are many more within the overall blanket or umbrella of machine learning, but I think it makes sense to boil these down into these 4 basic model types. So you have machine learning regression, classification, clustering, and anomaly detection. These model types correspond typically with different types of output values. So a regression model in machine learning will produce a continuous numerical value output. So it's essentially any number, right, within an infinite range of numbers. So a question that you would ask is, what will X number be? What will my sales be in the next quarter? How many customers will churn over the next year? What will my uncollectible receivables be over the next 2 or 3 years? This is a continuous numerical value that we can build a model for to give us just a number as a response. Okay. Next model type, classification. Unlike an output of a continuous numerical value, a classification model can output typically more a binary result. So think yes or no, or an assignment of an output value associated to the question. So probability of, let's say, a customer to churn or to pay late. I want to basically give a yes or no answer to that response. So will this customer churn within this time frame? Yes or no. Is this customer going to pay late on their next invoice? The response of a classification model is going to provide that output, yes or no, okay? Or any sort of binary or predefined set of ranges and responses, essentially in a list. Then more advanced model types that we see customers leveraging in machine learning, I'll talk about next. So clustering. What clustering does is it takes a group of data, let's say a group of our customers, and it's going to either create let's say a table of those customers or a ranking or different groupings of the customers where I'm not defining the specific output. I'm not saying group it into a list of customers in category A and category B, where this model output is going to tell us different ways that it's identified to group those customers together. So if I ask a machine learning model, give me different potential bundles of products that follow the same growth pattern, I might have 2 bundles of products as an output or 1,000 different potential bundles of products as an output. And a clustering machine learning model is going to take those inputs and give me an output of bundled product. Similarly, if I want to ask a machine learning model, show me groups of customers or vendors that have the same habits, whatever that habit might be. Again, the result here could be just a single response. One group, my entire customer base or vendor base follows the same habit that I'm looking for, or I could have 100 or 1,000 or 1,000,000 different groups of my customers that are grouped together in similar habits or products or bundles that follow the same growth pattern. And then finally, another common type of model is anomaly detection. And typically in this type of a model, the output is a score, let's say most commonly from just say 0 to 100. So which payments are likely to charge back? I'm going to score each payment with a probability of that payment's likelihood to charge back. If I'm looking at customers that are likely to churn, I can receive a score between a range of, let's say, 0 to 100 of each customer is assigned a score of their likelihood to churn. Okay, so different types of machine learning models that are, again, typically implemented within our analytical tools that we use, and I'll talk about what those are later, will provide different types of outputs, and different types of responses from the machine learning model are better suited to different types of questions. Now, the last column on this slide that I haven't talked about so far is supervised or unsupervised. And at a very high level, supervised machine learning models are lower complexity, easier to implement. Unsupervised models may require more complexity, more data, more model training and interaction with, let's say, data scientists or developers. So I'm going to make it very simple just for purpose of today. A supervised model just means that a human provides the possible output values, okay? So I'm looking for a number, a continuous number value. I'm looking for my classification model to group my customers into two groups: likely to churn, not likely to churn; likely to pay late, not likely to pay late. An unsupervised model, I don't define the output or the response from the ML model. So again, in an unsupervised model, I'm asking the question, show me bundles of products that have the same growth pattern. It might result in 100 different bundles. It might result in 5. I don't know. The machine learning model is identifying that behavior. It's creating that output for me based on what it finds. And in anomaly detection, the same way. I'm not assigning a specific tranche of scores to group customers into for anomaly detection. It's unsupervised in the sense that the machine learning model is assigning that score on its own based off of the data that all of the data that we're feeding into it. We are, the computer itself, the ML model itself, is providing those output values to us. Okay. So we'll go to the next slide here, and I'll talk a little bit more in detail about some other use cases. And these are other model types within the 4 categories that I just showed before. But I just always think it's helpful to show some sample questions. Some of these might not be relevant to finance and accounting workflows, but just to get folks understanding of what are some common questions that machine learning can be leveraged for to answer. So in a logistic regression, a different model type, I can ask, will a customer purchase a product after receiving a marketing email? In maybe a time series analysis, I can say, what will be the sales of our new product in the next 6 months? In a decision tree type model, I might be able to find a result for which features of our product are driving customer satisfaction the most. What should we focus on in terms of features of our product as it relates to customer satisfaction scores? In a random forest, this is largely used for sales forecasting, but also I can predict what transactions are most likely to be fraudulent as a sample question. And a few more here just to review. Again, this is all still within the realm of machine learning. Neural networks. Can we forecast the demand of our products for the next year based on various factors? I'm defining those factors: marketing spend, what season we're in. KNN, can we identify potential customer segments based on their purchase history? So create segments of customers. Remember, I don't know how many segments will be created, but propose different customer segmentation just based on purchase history. SVM, support vector machines. Can we classify customer feedback as just positive or negative based off of unstructured text data, maybe data that we're compiling from our email communication with customers, or from social media, or from transcripts from recorded customer service calls with them? And base classifier, can we predict in a more binary way which email inquiries will lead to a sale? So can we essentially take an email inquiry and record the likelihood or classify that into this email sounds like it's going to result in a new sale? So these are just kind of different business-wide use cases or questions that you can ask as sample use cases with machine learning. And again, right now we haven't started to talk about generative AI yet. We're just talking about capabilities that we see customers implement with machine learning models. All right, so I'm going to move us over into our next poll question. And this one I'm always really curious about to hear. So a little bit of an expansion of our prior poll, but what is your company's leadership attitude to ML-based forecasting and predictive analysis and predictive analytics? So your leadership at your organization, based off of their communications, what you know as in terms of the initiatives that they're driving, what is your company leadership attitude to ML-based forecasting and predictive analytics as a whole? So we have either not aware, not interested at all, maybe interested but not actively supporting any initiatives, supporting through executive sponsorship, and our leadership is directly engaged themselves in ML-based projects.
Stephen, if I may interrupt just quickly, and again, I'd like to ask another question while we're kind of waiting for population. So thinking of this in the context of your experience and obviously the work that you're doing with various organizations, can you provide some context of considerations that organizations that you work with are considering that addresses concerns related to governance and controls related to potential impacts with the usage of AI? And maybe if you can give one or two kind of unintended consequences that perhaps you've seen. If you wouldn't mind giving us just a brief view there.
Well, I don't think the application of AI or machine learning so far has really generated many surprise unintended consequences for our customers. Typically, the stakeholders, let's say in our case, in the work that we do at Myers-Holum, are really limited to FP&A teams and accounting and finance organizations, and so there's a pretty limited list of stakeholders or users that are engaging with these tools in the work that we do. But the most challenging barrier I think that companies have today is organizing all of their enterprise data from all of the applications and the software that they use as an organization into a consolidated location from which then to apply ML tools. So the project in itself of just collecting the data that we need to be able to then start the actual work to implement ML-based forecasting is typically the biggest barrier. And from a governance standpoint, really dependent on industry, but if the FP&A or accounting or finance team is working in a silo to now collect and aggregate data from various sources, especially for a global organization, remaining compliant with governance controls and localized regulations around data privacy and other implications is something that obviously also is a pretty big consideration as part of those projects.
Thank you, Stephen. Very helpful. Appreciate that added insight. Looks like we've got a population here, so ask you to talk to us about the responses.
Absolutely. So, I'd say interesting to see executive leadership very low in terms of directly engaged ML-based projects. I guess what that tells me is that the support for these programs and implementing these new technologies still really needs to be sold and proven out to executives in terms of the additional benefit that it can provide an organization. We'll talk a little bit about that more, but I think we have seen customers even in the SMB in the middle market that after implementing ML-based tools, especially let's say in forecasting, have immediately improved or in a very short order of time have improved their, let's say, forecast accuracy through even just some lightweight additional tools around machine learning that they've implemented as, again, part of their forecasting operations. I think interested but not actively supporting, that's the biggest bucket. It makes sense to me. These are still, even though, again, ML has been around for quite some time, these are still, I think, considered emerging technologies and capabilities for a lot of organizations. And so at least right now, we're piquing the interest of executive leadership at organizations, but there needs to be more work done by stakeholders that are really interested in leveraging these technologies to make a business case to engage in a project here. All right. So we talked on the prior few slides about ML-based use cases for organizations and just different model types and some of the questions that we can ask that leveraging ML would help us answer. And I want to talk now just on one slide, high level, on what generative AI would be used to do and what use cases are for generative AI. And really, generative AI is again, it's generative, it's creating new content, creating new information. And so really generative AI is used to create responses, where we see ML really being used to ask and answer questions. One really common use case that we're seeing organizations adopting rapidly with off-the-shelf tools and maybe a select few are building internally is first just providing a company-specific search for business users to ask questions, right? So rather than writing a report, rather than asking an FP&A stakeholder or a data engineer or technical or business user to go and fetch data and put it all together and build a model, build a report or a forecast, generative AI tools can incorporate natural language processing to take a plain text written question and generate an answer or a formatted report or a narrative report based just on that ask. Okay, so for companies leveraging generative AI in this way, they basically have their own internal Google search to say, what were my sales for the same month last year for this product? Typing that query in just in plain text, generative AI can output a formatted report, a report in detail, in a grid, in a table format, anything that's related to text. This is kind of a common emerging use case where companies are really trying to implement that internal company search just on my company-owned data. I think a little bit more specifically and maybe more practically for the current state is we have tools today, off-the-shelf BI tools, whether it's Oracle Analytics Cloud or others, that are now getting better and better very rapidly at automatically generating explanatory text, let's say on variance analysis reports, and just based on accounting events or maybe other business information. So I mentioned, a flux report earlier, or even just generating some simple narrative text, actually, which I'll show a screenshot of later. If you're building a model, you're building a report, it's very easy to now ask with NLP, natural language processing, to provide explanatory text into a certain element of a data visualization or report or a graph. And natural language generation is used to actually build that answer. So plain text, a written description, a memo, in accompanying a model that you might have built already. From an accounting workflow and close standpoint, automatically identifying reference fields for transaction matching. So if you are working in transaction matching tools today, we're seeing many of these applications as part of our close process, our reconciliation tool sets that are getting smarter and smarter at automatically identifying reference fields for transaction matching. So in the past, we had to create a rules engine, match based off of account total, date, timestamp, other related information. It's a little bit more of a black box nature today with generative AI, where we're getting better and more intelligent recommendations on even something as rote or transactional as just a reference field on transaction matching. And I think most exciting for us in generative AI is this concept where in accounting today, right, and building accounting workflows, integrating a general ledger with, let's say, operational systems that are generating accounting events, that's a large project for an ERP implementation today. We have many operational systems, point of sale systems, billing systems, manufacturing execution systems that our organizations are implementing globally for their operations. And it's the job of an accountant to analyze the accounting events created by those applications that the business is using, apply judgment to those, and then propose accounting treatment, GL designation, revenue recognition, et cetera. Generative AI is going to help us in a very rapidly accelerating way automatically begin to apply judgment to external transactions that are originated outside of our core ledger or our ERP. And so integrating new operational systems, new transactional systems into our ERP and applying judgment to those transactions is something that will just become much faster to implement, much easier to do. And generative AI, I think in the future, will also help us be a lot more accurate in the judgment that we apply to those external accounting events. So some interesting aspects here of generative AI. I will give a quick screenshot or an overview of just what it looks like simply with off-the-shelf tools that are available today to apply natural language narration to a data visualization. So in this case, we have just kind of a sample dashboard. This is, let's say, representative of a warehouse or production facility where we're keeping track of number of accidents by day or by month that are happening within that production facility. And right now, our BI team, our FP&A folks have, let's say, built this data visualization dashboard. This is within NetSuite Analytics Warehouse, which is a data warehouse for NetSuite. Already today, just out of the box, I can highlight a data visualization or a graph or a diagram. I can open up my toolbar. I can click language narrative, and without even going into a large project to implement this, I can now have a language narration automatically generated based off of just that data that I selected. So you can see here that if I want to write an email or write a memo to explain a graph or a diagram that I need to communicate to an executive or to a business stakeholder, almost instantly I can select that data set, go into my toolbar, click language narrative, and the system is going to generate a natural language narrative just based off of that data in the system. So this is something that's just available off the shelf today with really no additional model building or tooling or training required. And let's say we have a revenue report. I just have another example here of a language narrative generated by a revenue report from an Oracle example. And so I ingested a narrative report into my BI tool. I click language narrative, and the system output this text. The data represents revenue between January 2008, November 2010, and some other detail between where it's giving me a characterization of that data kind of in a really simple, straightforward way. So this is something that is an accessible use case just by implementing BI tools that are kind of standard again and pretty off the shelf. Now, I talked about earlier the creating accounting judgment, which I think is really important and something that we're really excited about. So I wanted to talk about a future use case in generating transaction classification, really more for an accounting team, getting us closer to what we're now all calling this zero-day close accounting process. So today's process of integrating transactional information to accounting systems probably looks something like this for most organizations. First, our accounting team has to write a functional specification and say, here's the data that we're looking at from our transactional systems. Here's how we need to ingest it, transform it, classify it, map it to the GL. Here's the revenue treatment that we have to apply to it, et cetera. So to start that process today, a developer would have to identify source system tables and transactions from our external systems. And then a developer needs to write code to transform that external system data, map it to ERP transactions and tables. The developer needs to engage in a project. We're testing these workflows. We're building reconciliation tools around them, building integrations between our operational systems and our core ledger and ERP. And developers then have to write that code and deploy these integrations through an integration platform or through another application. And then accounting teams have to reconcile and make sure that these data flows and accounting events that we're mapping to our GL are auditable. We need to implement maybe additional reconciliation tools and workflows. And there's a lot of work involved in doing that. Well, in the future with generative AI, what we're expecting to start happening very soon is that the transaction classification, the matching, and the reconciliation will become increasingly automated. So we are seeing some customers that are interested in the cutting edge of their ERP systems and their financial and accounting processes, applying large language models, this new generative AI concept, to be the glue that sits today between your company's many enterprise applications and your core ERP. So while the current approach is writing specification documents, turning those over to developers, having developers build integrations, map to the GL, then test those through a process, then continually reconcile those in a separate application or offline, In the future, maybe a prompt would include an accounting or a business user just writing a natural language prompt to say, compile sales data from point of sale system and represent as a daily journal entry by item and segment by location, exclude revenue that is tied to returns and chargebacks from my settlement report. And so this single prompt, leveraging a generative AI technology, I think in the very near future will result in us automatically having a system that can ingest data from our business applications, and very intelligently create that payload or package of information or accounting events, automatically map it to our general ledger, and then provide a much more auditable reconciliation process with full data lineage back to those applications, and really decrease the time to go live and time to value for an ERP implementation project, and build much more robust accounting process flows for our ERP projects. So this is something that is a future use case, leveraging generative AI to create data pipelines for accounting purposes. But we're expecting that this is something that we'll start seeing our companies implement within the next 1 to 2 years. All right, so I'm going to move over to our third poll question today. Has your organization begun the process of implementing an enterprise data warehouse or just any BI tools at all? So putting machine learning and AI aside, do you have a dedicated business intelligence application today? Do you have a data warehouse today in your organization? So response would be no plans to implement a data warehouse or dedicated BI tools. We're evaluating, but not yet implemented a data warehouse or any BI. And we're currently implementing or already implemented a data warehouse and or dedicated BI applications.
Stephen, again, if I may ask a quick question while we're waiting for the audience to populate their responses, either from your personal perspective or from the perspective of Myers-Holum, any thoughts, suggestions around the potentiality of introducing biases by the usage of Gen AI in the context of accounting or finance? Obviously, a lot of visibility kind of in the media today around this context. Concerns that you have, some cautionary statements that you would have for folks as they kind of think about the introduction and usage of Gen AI specifically?
Yeah, well, maybe it is an unintended consequence that generative AI or even outputs from machine learning models can contain biases. And look, ML especially does not have all of the context. So if we implement, let's say, an ML-driven sales forecasting plan and workflow, the management committee, the business executives, the stakeholders are still really always responsible for finalizing the outlook, okay? And it's their input that's still very much required and needed on narrowing down what the outlook will be and finalizing that. It's important when we implement these tools that there's a lot of transparency in how the models are created and how they're leveraged, so that business users or executives or the folks that are responsible for selecting and that, let's say, that final outlook and sticking to it, are maybe aware of any ingrained bias or the potentiality for one to exist.
Thank you, Stephen.
All right, great. So we've got about an equal split on these responses here today. So which is interesting to see. This poll was kind of a leading question because the next slide here in the presentation I'd like to talk about is really a core prerequisite for implementing a lot of these tools. And that's in order to effectively roll out machine learning functionality or apply it to your FP&A process or use generative AI within your accounting process. It's almost a critical hard requirement to have that unified set of enterprise data from which to work off of. We're going to talk just a little bit about what that means to really build an enterprise data warehouse for an organization. And very simply, what it means is that for us to implement an ML project with a client, we need a central repository of that company's enterprise data. So we're typically not implementing machine learning forecasts, or we're not getting the most that we can out of leveraging generative AI with just a company's core financial transactions or core GL data. We need a unified repository. We need a centralized enterprise data warehouse for that organization with as much of the organization's generated data as possible, kind of all in the same place, whether it's unstructured data, again, like emails or phone call transcriptions or social media data, or structured data such as the type of information that would be generated through a business application or an order management system. So, and that data, importantly, also needs to be somewhat structured and blended together. So whether we have data coming from an e-commerce site, point of sale system, a company's mobile app, their CRM, their customer service tools, obviously their ERPs, maybe they have various ERPs globally. It's important, and it's a large facilitator of implementing these projects, that we have a single data repository to work off of. And this, again, is probably one of the biggest bottlenecks that we do have in rolling out machine learning or even more generative AI use cases or capabilities for our clients. Actually, the hardest part is just getting all of that organization's data in one place. Just another aspect of this is that it also adds to the effectiveness and our ability to certify our models if we have clean data, unified data across the organization. So often this also means not only connecting into these data sources, but leveraging an approach of master data management, where we're characterizing this information across, especially, let's say, a global organization or an organization that uses many different ERPs or subledgers or operational systems. It's important for us to create a unified model of that data as well, from which then we can use as the basis, as the repository for the information that we incorporate into an ML or an AI project. So that's just a kind of a quick note on what companies need to do really before they start thinking about the build or the incorporation of machine learning. Again, a core prerequisite is having that centralized data warehouse, or at least the capability to construct one. And final poll question for today. In your individual role, maybe now that you've been through this presentation, do you plan on using AI or ML in accounting or finance functions anytime soon? So I'd like to hear whether, yes, we're already using, I'm already planning or using ML and AI today. Planning on incorporating these technologies within a year, not this year, but in the future. Or right now, in my individual role, I'm not even considering it.
Stephen, again, while we're waiting for population, quick question, just your perspective. Obviously, a lot of concern about the implications of AI, specifically as it relates to humans in accounting and finance function. Any perspective, any oversight that you might share there as to what the relationship will inevitably kind of become between the usage of AI and people actually being able to keep their jobs?
Well, you know, it's a very philosophical question that you asked. I think that with every leap in technology or innovation or technological capability, the fear has always been there that it's going to replace the job functions of individuals. But I think in reality, we implement ERP software, right, as a core focus, and there are many tools that provide countless automations, process automation, report generation already, even without leveraging machine learning or AI. And what we haven't really noticed is that it permanently reduces the need for individuals or humans to still work in supporting the functions or the goals of an overall enterprise or an organization. So these tools in generative AI and machine learning, they will help they'll help transform, I think, the day-to-day job functions of individuals, where they're less focused on, the rote work around report aggregation or report generation, or they're less focused on, less required to, manually run a reconciliation, or even, there's less time that goes into generating a 10K as an example, right? These soon can be really automatically generated, but it will result in the same group of folks really now becoming analysts and more analytical users, rather than, folks that are spending, I think, most of their time on kind of just the piping and the rote creation of information, or these outputs that we've discussed today. So
Thanks,
I
Stephen.
personally didn't. Yeah, absolutely.
Very helpful. Yeah, that's great information. I mean, obviously, quickly summarizing what you said, it was what I heard is, continue to participate in things like you're talking about today to drive their knowledge and their competency related to the topic. So thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, so I think somewhat of an equal distribution for these three responses, but not this year, but in the future, definitely resonates with me. Nice to see that I think about 15% of you are already using some ML or AI capabilities today, almost a quarter within a year. Very exciting. And for the folks not even considering it, I would strongly suggest that you spend some time just researching these capabilities in more detail, how they're applied to finance and accounting functions. There's an opportunity in every role and every job function for these applications to make a pretty big difference. All right, and so finally, we've just got one more slide for today before we open up for Q&A. How do we implement just best practices for implementing ML and AI? I think the first is these are big rocks. These are big emerging technologies, and it does require participation from a large number of stakeholders in an organization to be successful. So executive sponsorship, top-down support, that's very important to us in implementing, and very important to a successful outcome, and finding those use cases and really getting them implemented across an organization. When we talk about, maybe even more specifically, let's say onboarding ML in forecasting, this is never a flip of a switch cutover where we're going to change the way we compile, let's say, our field sales forecast, and then just immediately start using the new ML-driven approach. Commonly, we're running in parallel, we're transitioning slowly. So in a forecasting scenario, we might go 2, 3, 4 quarters leveraging both the ML-based forecast side by side with our standard field sales forecast. We're providing both versions to business leaders. And then at some point when we feel comfortable, we'll start to see that forecast to accuracy and across multiple versions pay off. And it may then result in us only leveraging the ML tools going forward. Kind of like what you asked about earlier, Sam, the human input will never be entirely replaced. So far today, these tools don't understand all of the macro implications, business strategy change. So we have data scientists that are there to validate model performance, and the initial output does need to be bounce back and forth between kind of core business stakeholders and our data teams, but executives and business operators and the folks that are really finalizing the selected outlook, they also need to understand those inputs, the biases, the data behind the model. And ultimately, right now, we're in no instance are we replacing human input holistically. Finally, last point for today, this initial build of, let's say, an ML forecasting workflow as an example, it will take time. We need large data sets. We need several years of data compiled for this really to work well. So piping and organizing that data in, building the models, training them, running in parallel over a few quarters, we will eventually get to, and we're seeing our customers realize efficiencies of reducing cycle time in these processes. But the initial builds, they do take time. It's not a flip of a switch by any means at all today. So this is my final slide. I hope you've enjoyed some of the topics that we discussed so far. And we'll open the floor to any Q&A in the last 4 or 5 minutes here.
Thanks, Stephen. Attendees, you should see the evaluation survey open on your screen at this point. If it did not open, please click the evaluation survey icon at the bottom of your screen for access. It is important, and we do appreciate your feedback, so do please complete the survey. As Stephen said, we're going to ask a few more of the audience questions. Let me remind you that participants, you can send questions by typing them into the Q&A panel on the right side of your screen. So first question for you, Stephen, real quickly, based on your experience of where we are today, is AI being used primarily as a decision support tool rather than decision-making tool in and of itself, understanding that the intent is to obviously migrate to being able to have decision-making abilities? Any commentary there?
You know, for the majority of use cases, it's always a decision support tool, right? So we're not using AI or machine learning today to completely replace the human decision-making process in terms of how we steer an organization. On a micro level, it may be, as an example, a payment processor most payment processors are using machine learning and AI to determine whether or not they want to accept a credit card charge, whether they're going to decline that charge or they're going to allow it to authorize. So in some specific transactional scenarios, I think, yes, machine learning is being used as a decision tool, but an organization always has the right to override that decision. And in most use cases today, especially from an FP&A function or for an accounting function, it's a decision support tool today.
Thank you, Stephen. Again, based on your experience, your company's experience, are there certain areas that your clients are experiencing either more immediate or more significant value by the introduction and usage of AI tools or ML tools as a precursor? And then quickly related to that, can you provide some suggestions for the audience related to some of the things that should be included as they start building value proposition statements to get investments for obviously these types of tools? Any thoughts there?
Sure. So if you're just starting as an organization and exploring these technologies, I think implementing machine learning driven forecasting models is probably the most a very easily provable outcome. So you can run these models in parallel. You can run ML-driven forecasts in parallel with your standard process, and over that time frame, it is very common that we're demonstrating improved forecast accuracy when leveraging machine learning-driven forecasting approaches. That is cut and dry, straightforward. Generative use cases obviously are a lot newer and still emerging in organizations, and it's being leveraged mainly also by individual contributors in the normal day-to-day. I think it's definitely helping folks become just more productive overall. So harder maybe to quantify that without a larger study. But overall, I'd say, implementing machine learning in an FP&A function, very demonstratable improvement. Unheard of for us not to see an increase in forecast accuracy, as an example, if implemented correctly. And the data is out there absolutely to prove that.
All right. Thank you, Stephen. Looks like we're at the top of the hour. Again, Stephen, on behalf of IMA, thank you very much for sharing your knowledge and expertise. Obviously, again, thank you to Oracle NetSuite as the sponsor for today's session. We're very appreciative you've made time for us. And again, let me say thank you to each of our attendees. We appreciate your support of IMA organizationally, and again, making these webinars particularly valuable activities that we can continue to deliver to you on an ongoing basis. So thank you to everybody. We appreciate your time today.
Thank you.